I just bought an iPhone 12 Pro Max, but it's completely destroyed. When this phone first launched in November 2020, it was arguably the best phone money could buy. This one, however, it's gonna need some work. In this video, I'm gonna try repair it using some techniques you might not have seen before. Will I be successful and be able to make a profit, or will I waste my time and money? Keep watching to find out. To start, I'm going to be using this pentalobe screwdriver to remove the two screws from the bottom of the phone. Heating the phone to 75 degrees C should make the phone easier to open. Opening the screen with alcohol, a razor blade and a guitar pick usually is quite easy, but with this phone the housing was so warped that the screen needs quite a lot of force to remove. You can see here that the polarizer has broken away from the OLED, and there's a hole that goes right through the screen into the battery. The TrueDepth crystal is no longer attached, the moisture sensor indicators are being active, and there's signs of rust. There's a hole in the battery which could easily start a fire. Can we even repair this thing? First, we need to remove the screen. To do this, we remove the screws from the shield that's covering the front speaker and the proximity flex. Once that's removed, we can remove the next shield that holds down the battery and the OLED connector. Gently disconnect the battery, the OLED, and the proximity flex cables. We can now remove the screen and get a good look inside the rest of the phone. The housing's so broken you can easily pull it apart. If we look at the screen, you can see the hole that goes all the way through. You can also see the polarizer layer that's separated. Now I'm going to remove the battery using alcohol and a pry tool. I'm being really gentle here because I'm slightly concerned this battery might set on fire at any moment. Now the battery's out, you can really see the damage. How did this thing not explode? To make this phone work, we're going to need a new screen, but Apple's prices are a joke, £349. Let's take a look on eBay and see what the prices for original ones are. These prices for original and refurbished displays are just too high. Even at £90, that's eating far too much into our profit. I think we're going to do this ourselves. I managed to buy this broken screen from my friend for just £25. It's original and we're going to refurbish it. So first we start by taping the screen. We do this so it's easier for the next step, which is the glass removal. Using thin wire, we can actually remove the glass from the OLED itself. This might look easy, but cutting through the glass is actually quite difficult because you can easily damage the OLED. Once the OLED's damaged, that's it, no more profit, and the screen has to be thrown away. Next, we start to remove the frame. Removing the frame at this stage of the repair can also result in damaging the display, so again we have to be really careful when doing this part. As you can see, I've been using plenty of alcohol. This makes the removal process that little bit easier. Once removed, this is what the frame looks like. You can see it's stuck down with double-sided tape and it's got glue around the edges. Next, we can lift the display from the glass. Just look how flexible these screens are. I always think the glass looks so cool once you've removed it. Next, we need to remove the glue from this display. To do this, I'm going to be using this yellow spinning rod tool. For best results, you want the spinning rod to be facing the opposite direction of the glue you're removing. If you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. This lets me know if I should make more videos like this in the future because they take an extremely long time to create and I want people to learn something as they watch. I'm now going to use alcohol and a cleaning cloth to remove most of the glue that's been left behind. Some of the stubborn glue can be removed by using this other spinning rod, but be careful, it's really easy to scratch the polarizer layer. Now the screen has most of the glue removed, we can put it in the clean room and shine the green light on it. The green light shows any glue or dust that we've missed. I'm using this alignment mold for the display. Some people hand align the screens, but I prefer to use this as it allows me to get it perfect every time. Because this screen is curved, I put a small amount of double-sided tape on each corner of the mold. This allows the screen to lay flat so the glass can be placed on top without any issues. The glass has glue already pre-applied. Using one finger, I can lightly press down to make contact with the OLED on the other side. And now it's time for laminating. This 12.9 YMJ machine uses a vacuum to suck most of the air out of the chamber. It then puts an even pressure on the screen so the glass and the OLED bond together perfectly. Once complete, we're left with a couple of bubbles. We next have to put it in the autoclave for about 3 minutes to remove them. Now that 3 minutes has passed, we can check to make sure the bubbles have all been removed. If they were not, we could put it back into the autoclave again for a few more minutes. Now it's time to add the frame. Because the frames are so thin, adding glue to the frame by hand is very difficult. This machine helps us to add the perfect amount of glue to get a professional result. Before I had this machine, I used to use cold press glue, but that took 24 hours to dry and was not as strong. This glue only takes 5 minutes to dry and it holds very well. Here you can see that I'm aligning the glued frame to the display. It's crucial that we get this aligned correctly, or the screen will not sit flush when installed into the phone later on. Now the frame's aligned, we need to press the screen at 97 degrees for 5 minutes. And that's it. That's our new screen complete. We need to swap this earpiece speaker, which also has the proximity and ambient light sensor attached, from the old screen to the new one. If you ever struggle to remove the proximity and ambient light sensor, you can use more heat and a little bit of alcohol and it should come out much easier. Now the screen is complete, we can use a new battery temporarily to test the phone to see if it powers on or not. We will refurbish the old battery later on. If the phone does work, it should turn on when I plug it into the power. We've got the Apple logo, and it's on. But the data does need to be wiped. Now that we know the phone turns on, we next need to replace the housing. I really hope that this is the only water damage we find. Any signs of rust inside a phone are never good. This screw also has a covering of rust, but the rest of the board looks okay, for now. Because the phone is so badly damaged, I'm going to use a genuine pulled housing from another device that has all original parts. Genuine parts are always higher quality than aftermarket ones, and if fully working, they should stop any issues like boot loops or 3-minute restarts. Here we're removing the screws that hold the camera in place. This camera was not working, so unfortunately this will also need to be replaced. With all the screws removed, we can lift the logic board out to inspect it closer. It actually looks really clean and in good condition, which is extremely lucky considering the state the phone was in. This is the TrueDepth module. These are quite difficult to repair, and looking at the state of this one, I don't know if it will be possible. A new one from Apple will cost £179, which is way out of our budget. This is the LiDAR sensor. We need to transfer it from the old housing to the new one. If we don't swap it, the rear camera will not function correctly and will cause unwanted issues. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi antenna on the new housing I bought was torn. Luckily, the one in this phone is still salvageable. I don't like to see any water indicators activated, so I'm going to replace this with my own. I'm cleaning the shards of glass using 99.9% alcohol here so that it doesn't scratch the paint on the inside of the glass of the new housing. Here I'm installing the Wi-Fi antenna that we just salvaged from the old housing to this new shiny one. Even though this housing came with its own LiDAR sensor, we still need to remove it and install the one from our original phone. I had this camera in the workshop in a bag that said, "Dust on lens." We will fix this dust later, but in the meantime, we will need to install this dusty camera to make sure the phone is working as it should. Because the phone is password protected, but Find My iPhone is turned off, we need to flash the device to wipe it. We do this using a software called 3U Tools. Unfortunately, this phone was giving us an error at 20% and would not flash. I found in the past that if we disconnect the front speaker and flash the device using JCID Battery Assistant, we can overcome this error. Luckily, this flashing method worked. We still need to connect to the Wi-Fi in order for the phone to realise it's no longer locked to the account. As you can see, I'm setting up the device, but then it freezes and restarts. Because we wiped the phone, we can see the error codes on the computer. The error is PRS0. This relates to the charging port flex. You usually see this with aftermarket charging ports, however, this new housing was likely disassembled quickly and they probably tore the charging cable somewhere. Luckily, I have another one in stock, so we can swap it. However, this adds more time, as it's held in with a lot of screws that need to go back in the correct place. Before fully removing everything, let's plug in the cable and do a quick test. If it does not restart in 3 minutes, then we've found the fault. Good news is the phone allowed us to set up without any more restarts or crashes. The bad news is, we have all of these messages saying we need to finish the repair. We'll take a look at some of these later, but for now, let's start by removing the screws that hold the charging flex, so that we can replace it for the new one. This is the rear speaker, and it's the largest one in the phone. This is the Taptic engine. It vibrates when you type to give haptic feedback, and it's also what vibrates to alert you when I have a new video. So make sure you're subscribed to my channel with notifications on, so you can be positive that yours is working correctly. And yes, that was a shameless promotion, but who else is going to do it for me? Using a little alcohol, we can gently lift the old cable out. I want to keep this sticky foam pad in good condition, as this will help us have an OEM finish. In goes the new charging port, and now we just need to put what feels like 1,000 screws back into place, along with the Taptic engine, the bottom speaker and the SIM tray that we removed earlier. This sensor is a barometer, and it measures air pressure used for elevation detection. For instance, the Health app uses it for telling you the amount of floors you've climbed. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who liked and commented on my last video. I read and tried to reply to all of them, and it really does motivate me to make videos, even though this is not my full-time job. Sometimes removing the glue from the housing can be difficult. Here I'm using the spinning rod tool again to remove it. It's much easier to do this if the housing is warm. This step isn't really necessary, but I like to remove any logos that some sellers put on replacement parts. The liquid I'm using for this is 99.9% alcohol. The water-resistant sealant from this replacement housing needs to be removed so we can replace it later. As you can see, it looks really dirty. Because the glue is quite tough, I'm using this flat-headed razor blade to remove it. And then I'm using 99.9% alcohol again with a Q-tip to remove any residue that's left behind. As you can see, the camera has a dust spot. This is inside the camera and not on the lens itself. To fix this, we're going to be using this ultrasonic cleaner and a special liquid to clean the entire camera. We want to dip the camera in the solution for no more than 6 seconds, and we don't want to touch the bottom of the cleaner. If we do, the camera will shake uncontrollably and you'll have to repair it using a special anti-vibration solution. The blemish has now been removed, so now we can start by trying to repair the front camera. The front camera is also attached to the TrueDepth camera. If we replace this part, we will lose Face ID. We're going to try copy the information from the chip responsible for Face ID and write it to another chip. But we've got an issue. This isn't reading the chip. This is what a working TrueDepth camera should look like when connected to this machine. What I'm going to try to do next is to manually see if I can remove the entire chip from the original broken TrueDepth and solder it to a new donor camera to read the data that way. If this doesn't work, then we're going to lose Face ID. This part from Apple is a whopping £179, and that is far too expensive for such a small part. This tiny chip here holds the data that we need, but the entire TrueDepth module has been falling apart and should not look like this. Using heat we can remove the chip, but under the microscope I could see a tiny crack. It's not looking good. We have to disassemble the donor Face ID module the same way and remove its chip so we can try solder the original broken one back on. I use this small grinder so we can lift the part out without bending the TrueDepth camera housing. If it's bent, the alignment does not work, and again, Face ID will not register. Here you can see more clearly the chip being removed. I've shown this on a 20p piece. That's about the same size as a US nickel. We add flux and try to transfer the original chip to this donor module. When you can nudge it and it bounces back, you know it's made a good connection and it's ready. This is the moment of truth. Will the machine be able to read the information on the chip? No. After all that work, the info cannot be read. This means that the chip was too damaged and Face ID will now be lost. Although the Face ID is now lost, at least the selfie camera will work again. I guess sometimes not everything's repairable. I noticed that the camera shield is missing a grounding pin at the top, and so I'm swapping out for another part. This might seem small, but if Apple puts it there, it's likely for a good reason. I'm trying to read the data from the old screen so I can write it to the new one before we do the IC swap. Unfortunately, the screen is too badly damaged and my machine can't read any of the data. To be configured correctly, we need to copy the TrueTone settings, which adjust the screen's colour based on your environment, and the NTSN, which is the screen's unique serial number, and then we need to write it to the new screen. So to avoid the unknown parts message, we have to jump through yet another hoop, retrieving the screen's serial data, then physically swapping the Touch IC from the old screen to the new one. Then the phone will recognise this as a genuine part. Here I'm prepping the Touch IC so we can place it on the new screen. To do this, the chip needs to be cleaned perfectly, then the new solder needs to be added to enable it to make a solid connection. Now that the chip is clean, I can use the stencil. The stencil allows me to add the perfect amount of solder paste. When the solder paste has been added, we can use tweezers and hot air to create perfect solder balls. Once the chip has been removed from the stencil, a blast of hot air is needed to make sure the solder is exactly where it needs to be. The solder balls will move into place using surface tension. I didn't record the removal of this chip from this refurbished screen, but it's essentially the same process as what I just did on the broken one. This is a special heat resistant tape so we don't burn the OLED underneath. I'm adding flux here to allow the pads to be cleaned prior to adding the Touch IC. This makes sure the pads are oxidation free and allows the new chip to sit correctly without any connection issues. Now the pads are being cleaned, I'm using a Q-tip again with some alcohol to remove the old flux before I add some fresh stuff. It's finally time to attach the Touch IC. First we align it and blast it with heat. We have to be very careful not to burn the OLED, so we cannot spend too much time doing this. Once that's been completed, I add a little bit of UV mask around the chip so it's slightly more reinforced. After the mask has been applied, I shine a UV light and leave it to cure. As you can see in the settings, the phone thinks we've still got a new display even though we swapped the Touch IC. We could not receive the NTSN from the original screen because it was too damaged. In order to retrieve this vital information and to make the phone believe its original display, we will need to do a process called brushing. Again, we can get this information using the JCID software. Now that the brushing is complete, we have to flash the device again using the official Apple firmware that we downloaded earlier from 3U Tools. The finished repair message is still showing because we have not yet written the secret MTSN data to the new screen. To retrieve this data, we need to connect the JCID V1SE to the computer and connect the phone also to the computer. We next click Fix TrueTone. If you've done this correctly, the MTSN and the LCM should show. With the phone still connected, we need to remove the screen and attach it to the V1SE machine. Head back over to the computer and click Fix TrueTone again. It will then ask if the screen you're writing to is original or third party. make sure you choose the correct one. If not, you could cause damage to the display. We have successfully removed the display notification, and now we can move on to removing the battery message. This is the old battery that was completely damaged. Most people would throw this away, but we need to remove the brain of the battery, also known as the BMS, so we can transfer it to the new cell. Using ceramic scissors, we can safely remove the BMS. If we use normal scissors here, we could cause a short circuit, which again could possibly cause a fire. This is the battery management system that has been removed from the cell. We need to remove the excess nickel and aluminium by using this grinding pen in order to make sure the new cell can make a good connection when we use the spot weld on it later. You can see that this battery cell comes without a battery management system connected. The spot welder we'll be using is the Quanley Macron Max. I've used a few other spot welders in the past, but this is the best one I've found. The yellow bit of plastic I have here is a guitar pick that I've cut to size. It's the perfect thickness to give the little bit of space between the cell and the BMS. This helps to create a factory looking battery when we're finished. Using the ceramic scissors again, one of the last stages of the repair is to trim the battery terminals. We can now install the protective plastic to the cell and then add the protective sticker to make the battery look as good as new. This is the final battery with a brand new cell. The phone will not be able to tell the battery cell is at 100%, so instead we have to use something called a tag on flex. This will make the phone believe that the cell is 100% again. If the battery is below 80%, you will need to use a battery calibration tool that charges and discharges the battery cell. This allows the battery to calibrate, and with time will increase the battery percentage. Once over 80%, you can continue with this tag on flex repair. Because we flashed the phone earlier using JCID's repair assistant, we do not need to flash the device again. We simply insert our new battery with the tag on flex, and it should show the battery health at 100%. You must use JCID's battery repair for this. A normal flash would not delete the battery health data, and therefore the phone would ignore the health on the battery and will instead keep the health that it has in its memory, for example 81%. You can see now that we only have two messages left, the rear camera message and the TrueDepth message. We can remove the message for the rear camera by calibrating it with Apple, but the TrueDepth one will not work because we were unable to fix this earlier. The calibration process does not need anything else to be installed or bypassed inside the phone, so now we can put the phone back together. One of the last things we need to do is to reapply the water resistant sticker that we removed from the housing earlier. I will give you a secret tip to make this stick even better. First, apply a small amount of 3M primer on a Q-tip and then run it around the frame of the phone and then also on the screen frame. This will give much better results and will be very close to what it was like when it came out of the factory. I imagine the question you might be asking is, was this repair even profitable? Some of you might not know this, but this is not my main job. I'm a designer by day and I do repairs like this in the evenings. Let's do a breakdown so we can see if we made a profit or loss during this repair. The broken phone itself cost me £65.20 to buy, which is quite high for a phone in this condition. Then we bought a genuine housing from AliExpress. This cost another £74.79. The battery cell was £6 and the tag on flex was about £2 after import tax. The rear camera I already had in stock from another device, so this cost me nothing. However, this would normally cost about £47 on eBay. The two TrueDepth cameras cost another £8.99 each. I already had the replacement charging port in stock, but if not, this would have cost me another £8.98. And finally, the screen that I bought from a friend was £25. So if I did not already have these parts lying around in stock, this repair would have cost me a whopping £251.95. But because I had some of these parts already in stock, this repair cost me £195.97. We could have made this repair much cheaper by using an aftermarket housing. But apart from the battery cell, we only used original parts to make sure we repaired this device to as close as original as possible. Not being able to fix Face ID on this device is a real shame, and it does mean that the profit will be affected. I estimate that we're only going to make around about £25 profit because similar devices are selling around the £225 mark. If you're still sticking around, I really appreciate you spending the time to watch this video. I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.